Associate Professor of Community Medicine in the College of Medicine, University of Ibadan. And it's a pleasure to be able to have this conversation with you this morning. We'll be talking about thinking through research questions and problem statements. By way of an overview, I will try to answer these questions during this session. First of all, why do we conduct research? How does one identify and describe a research problem? How does one identify research gaps? How does one identify and articulate research questions? And then after you've done all this, what comes next? Many people conduct research for many different reasons. There's a group of people who are just curious. They want answers. They're genuinely interested in identifying a problem and answering research questions. Hopefully, all of us have some of this in us when we're conducting research. Some people conduct research because they need to solve problems. There's a problem they've identified. They need to find a solution so that they can act on that. Another group of people are just altruistic. It's their desire to expand knowledge. They want the world to be better off because they have done their research. And then the reason that's most common in a university community like this is for promotion. People conduct research because they want to get promoted to the next level, or they want to get a degree. The publish or perish culture is widespread in Nigeria and around the world. And as a friend of mine would say, it should be publish and publish rather than publish or perish. The unfortunate thing is that because it's a game of numbers in many institutions, people do not put their best into every single paper. And so they're spread too thin, and the quality is affected by the urge and the desire to publish as quickly as possible. Another reason people conduct research is because there's free grant money. I know of people who have identified their research field based on the fact that they have seen many requests for proposals in a particular area. And they think, oh, okay, since the funders are interested in this area, that's where I'll go. So that's another reason why some people conduct research. Some people conduct research for the prestige or the recognition that comes with it. Now that we have many bodies who are ranking researchers all over the world, identifying people as being in the top 1% or the top 2% of their field, some people are looking at that prestige, at that recognition, and it's pushing them on to conduct even more research. And then the last reason I'd like to mention is that some people conduct research because the funder requires them to. In the past, when people are running programs, they just do their program, maybe disseminate to a small group of people and move on to the next project. But now many funders are requiring program managers and those who receive grants from them to publish their work. And so they have to go through the IRB procedure in order to be able to publish their work eventually. And so times are changing. Many funders are requiring that people publish when they give them money to do research. And we know he who pays the piper dictates the tune. In general, research starts with identifying a problem. And this problem needs to be a researchable problem. That means it needs to reflect a gap, usually a knowledge gap. We'll talk about the different types of research gaps, but at the basic level, every research gap is actually a knowledge gap because there's something we don't know and that we want to understand better. When I say researchable, I mean that it needs to be relevant, The research has to be relevant to the particular research field, whether you're in theater arts or you're in pharmacy or you're in dentistry or you're in medicine or you're in communication and language arts. The research that you're doing should be relevant to your field. To research in your field, it should be relevant to practice in your field, and it should be relevant to policies in your field. When I say researchable, I mean that you should be able to collect the data or access the data that you need for the problem that you've identified. If you're collecting the data, that would be primary data collection. If you're accessing existing data, that would be secondary data collection. So for the problem you've identified, will you have access to collect the data? Will you have access to analyze the existing data set? A researchable problem must not be too general or abstract. It needs to be specific. It needs to be manageable. We all know that people throw trash out of their windows when they're riding in a car. That's a big problem, but is it a researchable problem? Maybe. I would say it's too general, but perhaps if you're really interested in it, if, for instance, it's within the university community, you may want to refine the geography and refine the problem to look at learned people, university students doing the same thing, throwing trash out of the window within the university community. That is making it more manageable, less general, and less abstract. And therefore, it may be researchable after you have refined the problem. When we do research, the problem that we identify does not need to be brand new. It doesn't have to be a problem that nobody else has identified before, but it should be a problem that will add to the body of literature. We already know many things about many different concepts, many different fields, but there's still so much that we don't know. What is it that we don't know about the problem that you're interested in? What is it that's still contested about that problem? Perhaps you want to apply an existing framework or a new perspective to a very different context. Perhaps the problem you have identified has been identified in high-income countries, but it appears to be a new problem in low and middle-income countries like Nigeria. So you might want to ask research questions that have been asked in other contexts but have not been asked in this context, or questions that have been asked in this context, in this geography, but that have not been asked in this particular subpopulation. Perhaps we know the answer for all women of reproductive age, but we don't know the answer to the problem for women with disabilities, for instance, so a new population or a new subpopulation. When you have identified a problem, you need to find out where the gaps in knowledge are, or the gaps in practice, or the gaps in policy. The problem may be huge, but you need to identify what is already known about the problem and where there are gaps. And then you can identify the part of the gap, the piece of the problem that you will tackle. Problems are huge, and one research study cannot address all the problems around a given concept, around a given field. But if you've identified what is known, then you can move on to what is not known. There are different types of research gaps, like I mentioned earlier on. And for me, the most basic of all is a knowledge gap. At the end of the day, irrespective of the type of research gap that you're identifying, it's still a knowledge gap, or it should be a knowledge gap, because you're working on something that we don't know about. And so if you're identifying a knowledge gap, the goal is to bridge that gap in order to move the field forward. Another type of gap is a conceptual gap. Perhaps the literature is inconsistent about a particular field, about a particular area because everybody is defining concepts in their own way. So A comes and defines a particular concept in their way. B comes and defines the same concept in a different way. C comes and uses yet another definition for that same concept. And so if you're trying to bridge or fill a conceptual gap, your goal is to develop a clearer definition for that concept that will be acceptable to the field. A third kind of gap is a theoretical gap. There are many theories and models out there, but perhaps the problem you have identified cannot really blend well or align with the existing theories and models that you have come across. And so you have insight and would like to develop a brand new theory, a brand new model in order to fill this theoretical gap. There are also methodological gaps. Perhaps you have looked at all the methods that people have used to address the problem of interest in the past, and none of them seems to really get at the problem appropriately and fully. And so you want to design a new method in order to fill this methodological gap. Or it could be a practical gap. There's a gap between theory and practice, and you'd like to bridge this gap. You'd like to bridge this practical gap. Now, where do you look in order to be able to identify these gaps? You can look at published papers in journals in your research field. I realize that this is a broad range of people present today. And so whether your research field is in basic sciences or in arts or in communication or in engineering or medicine or pharmacy or dentistry, look at the published papers in your field of interest and related to the problem that you're interested in. Read the background section. Many times when you read the background section, most researchers already have done a good job in summarizing what is known and what is unknown. And they also identify the piece of what is unknown that they intend to address in that particular paper. And so reading that can give you insight into research gaps that still exist. Of course, this would be you reading papers that are relatively recent, not papers that are 10 or 20 years old, that other people have already addressed that gap. You can also look at the limitations section of published papers, which usually comes somewhere near the end of the discussion. What are the limitations that the researchers in the papers that you're reading have identified? Do you think that you can address some of these limitations? That can give you an idea of research gaps that you can work on. And then you can look at the literature that is already in projects or dissertations or theses in your university or in other universities around the world. Many projects, dissertations, and theses are freely available online. So you can review their own literature review the entire project or dissertation or thesis if you're able to, and see if they have mentioned some gaps that you still have not found addressed in the existing body of literature. Another way you can identify research gaps is to have conversations with experts in the field. You have professors in your department, and you can reach out to people even in other institutions who are experts in the field that you're interested in. You're thinking about doing research in this field. Sir, ma, do you know of some gaps that I can address? This is the problem I'm interested in. This is my line of thinking. Can you direct me? Can you guide me? So having conversations with experts in the field can also help you to identify research gaps or to refine the research gaps that you've already identified. And then lastly, of course, this is not an exhaustive list, but the last thing I'd like to talk about in this section about identifying research gaps and where to look is that many organizations these days publish research priorities. It could be a commentary, it could be an opinion piece, it could be a special article within a collection of articles where they talk about the research priorities and what is still unknown. And that can help you to identify research gaps as well. So now that you've identified the gap in the literature, you would want to write your problem statement. And the very first thing you should do is to be able to state the problem in very clear terms. Within the first paragraph, anybody reading your problem statement, if it's a dissertation or a thesis, or reading the introduction of your paper, should know the problem that you're addressing. And it should align with the topic of your research or the topic of your manuscript or the topic of your paper. I find that many times I have to read deep into the paper or deep into the dissertation or thesis or project before I understand the problem that the researcher is trying to address. This should not be the case. Within the first paragraph, within the first 2 sentences of the section where you're writing your problem statement, it should be crystal clear what the problem you're trying to address is. After you have clearly stated the problem, then you can provide context for the problem that you've stated. What's the size of the problem? Does it affect 50% of the population, 10% of the population, 90% of the population? Who does the problem affect? Does it affect women of reproductive age, children under 5, women who are disabled? When is it a problem? Is it a problem at particular times of the year? Is it a problem all year round? Why is it a problem? And where is it a problem? So these are some of the questions you should ask yourself in order to be able to provide context for the problem that you have very clearly stated. Now that we know the part of the problem we want to tackle, we can formulate research questions. Many people think they can just write research questions and run with it. It's usually not that easy. It's an iterative process. You draft the questions. That's just a first draft of your research questions. And then you go to the literature. Are you asking questions that have already been asked in this same population? Then you need to go and refine your questions because there's no point reinventing the wheel. After you've refined your questions, you need to talk to experts. These are the research questions that I'd like to ask. What do you think about them? Should I refine them in any way? Do you think that they're researchable questions? And I think this is a big shortcoming for us in this part of the world. Many times we limit ourselves to what we think and to our supervisors or advisors. We don't talk to other people. But the more people you talk to, especially those who know about that particular area, the better you're able to refine your ideas, the better you're able to refine your research questions. And then after you've talked to some experts, you need to interrogate your assumptions. What assumptions are you making with respect to these research questions? Are they genuine? Are they assumptions that will stand the test of time? So ask yourself deep questions and then refine your questions some more. And then talk to some more people. And then you can continue with your proposal. And after you have a full draft of your proposal, you should revisit those research questions and ensure that from the beginning of your proposal to the end of your proposal, or from the beginning of your paper to the end of your paper, you're telling a single story. Don't try to present 3 different papers in one. Don't try to do 3 research projects in one. One research project at a time. And so make sure that everything you're working on is linked to each other and tells a single story. After you have written your research questions and you're happy with them, you've gone through an iterative process, you can then, or as no, it doesn't have to be after, it can be at the same time, Concurrently, you need to assess the feasibility of answering these questions. Is it going to be straightforward and doable for you to get the permission that you need? Or are you going to have to jump through several hoops in order to be able to access the data, whether this is collecting primary data or using existing secondary data? If you're in demography or statistics, or you have a strong statistical background, you might want to do secondary data analysis using like the demographic and health surveys. Typically, these are freely available, but there are a few countries who do not make theirs freely available. And so you may have to seek permission on multiple levels. For primary data, where are you going to collect these data? Are you looking at answering research questions among minors? How easy will it be for you to get permission to talk to minors? Are you interested in work among the military? Do you have the connections to be able to get the permission that you need to access people in the military? So ask yourself about the feasibility of answering the research questions that you have identified. Then, do you have the expertise to answer these questions, or do you have access to the expertise to answer these questions? This is also important in assessing the feasibility. Do you have the time? If you're a master's student, you don't want to answer research questions that will take 3 years to collect the data. You should be able to ask questions that you'll be able to obtain the data within a 1 to 2 month period so that you can finish your master's program in good time. If you're a PhD student, you probably do not want to answer research questions that will take you a long time to obtain the data. If you're interested in a change in behavior or a change in attitudes, you may need a 6-month waiting period, which is fine for a PhD, but you don't want to ask questions that will require you to go back in a year, in 2 years, because that will lengthen the duration of your program. If you're a lecturer, there's more flexibility. You can be working on multiple projects at the same time. If you're a program manager and you're working on a strict timeline, you need to think about the timeline the funders have set. Are these research questions you will be able to address within the time frame that you have? And then another issue you need to think about with respect to feasibility are the funds. Do you have funds to pay for research assistants, a program officer, whoever else you need on your team? Do you have funds to pay for the materials? Do you have funds to give incentives where necessary? For instance, if you're asking people to come to your research office for your research, or you're asking them to come to a given location that they otherwise would not be going to, you would need to reimburse their transport. So ask yourself about the feasibility of the research questions that you have set. Do you have the funds that you need? So I'll go through 2 different examples, one in more detail than the second one, so that we can think about the different issues that I have laid out with respect to a problem statement and research questions. This is a paper from my PhD work. It's an older paper, but still it's useful for this exercise. Having a say matters, influence of decision-making power on contraceptive use among Nigerian women ages 35 to 49 years. Sometimes we know something about a given field, but there may be subpopulations where we think the relationships that have been explored may be slightly different. In this research, I was particularly interested in women who are older, specifically at the upper end of their reproductive spectrum. So I was interested in women who were 35 to 49 years of age, the upper limit being defined by the data source. I was using data from the Demographic and Health Survey. And so I knew that there was a lot of research available that talked about women of reproductive age. But sometimes in the analysis, they grouped women 35 to 49 as a single group. But I know that these women can be quite heterogeneous. And so it was important to me to understand whether or not there was a difference in the relationship between household decision-making and contraceptive use in this subgroup, this subpopulation of women.
Sorry, looks like
What happened?
I think she must have had internet challenges. Okay, she's
Okay.
back. Um, she's yet to join with our audio.
Apologies, I got cut off. I will
Oh, sorry.
rejoin
Okay,
now.
man. Yeah, welcome back, man.
I'll share my slide.
Okay.
Apologies, can you hear me, please?
Yes, and clearly.
Okay, thank you. Hopefully you heard most of what I said, but the point I was trying to bring out in this particular slide is that there was a lot of information in the literature related to women of reproductive age, but I felt that women who were older may experience a different relationship between their involvement in household decision-making and contraceptive use. And that was the basis for this research. And so I stated here, and I'm reading out what's in green. Little is known, however, about this relationship, that's the relationship between household decision-making and contraceptive use, among women at the upper end of the reproductive spectrum. So this is from the abstract of the paper. And then I went on to talk about the aim. But what I would like to draw your attention to on this particular slide is identifying the gap in the literature. The gap was that the relationship between household decision-making and modern contraceptive use among older women was not clear in the existing body of literature, and that's the gap I wanted to address. In stating the problem, I will read out this paragraph and then stress the text in red or wine. Women ages 35 and older are often left out of the conversation on contraception for a variety of reasons, including their waning fecundity, their age or perceived infertility, or the belief that they have sexual intercourse infrequently and so are not at risk of pregnancy. Researchers have known for several decades that even though many of these women wish to avoid pregnancy, they're unlikely to be using any contraceptive method, or if using, opt for unreliable methods. So there are two linked problems here. First of all, when people talk about contraception, they're often not thinking about women who are 35 and older because they feel they've completed their family, they've had all the children they want, especially in low and middle income countries where childbearing starts early. But even though these women do not want to get pregnant, they're not using any contraception, but they are still sexually active, and that is a problem. And when they do use contraception, they're using unreliable methods, like traditional methods that do not have any scientific basis. So I had stated the problem in that paragraph, and then I went on to provide context for this problem. Some older women erroneously believe that they're not at risk of pregnancy and therefore do not need modern contraception. Women, as they approach menopause, often experience irregular periods. So this is why they think they do not need contraception, because they assume that because their periods are irregular, they are not likely to get pregnant. And also, they don't have their monthly periods anymore. It might be coming every 3 months, every 4 months or so. And so they don't have that monthly reminder that they're still fecund. They still have the physiological capacity of becoming pregnant. Now, because this is a problem, we need to think about ensuring that these older women are protected against becoming pregnant when they do not want to be pregnant. because there are pregnancy-related morbidity and mortality. So I provided a context for the problem that I had previously described. And then I went on in the paper to talk about what we know. We know that there's a body of literature already, and it already talks about decision-making power and how those who are involved in decision-making are able to control their fertility through the use of modern contraception. But we don't know specifically about older women. Many people include these women in their analysis, but then they include age as a continuous variable in their multivariable models, or they put all women 35 to 49 in a single category, even though this is a heterogeneous group of people, because some of these women 35 to 49 are still having regular periods. Some of them are having irregular periods. Some of them actually want to get pregnant, still want children. Some of them have had all the children that they want. So it's a huge group of women at different stages of their reproductive lives. And so what we do not know is the uniqueness of these older women. And then I provided justification for the research. Women ages 35 to 49 represent 12.7% of the female population and 6.2% of the total Nigerian population. Of course, this is dated, but at the time. And so I was trying to say, this is not a trivial number. These women are important to us, and so we should care about them. Nigerian women ages 35 and older who are still menstruating are of special interest because they tend to be left out of existing family planning programs and services. Remember, I had said earlier on that they're left out of contraceptive conversations. And so I'm bringing this up again because whenever people are talking about contraception, whenever they're talking about family planning programs and services, they're specifically thinking about teenagers. They're thinking about younger women who are coming to antenatal clinic and talking to them about family planning, talking to women who come to postnatal clinic, trying to get at their partners. But what about these older women who are not going to antenatal clinic anymore, who have had all the children they want and therefore are not going to postnatal clinic? Nobody was talking about them, and I felt it was important to address them. So that was the justification for the research. And then I went into the research objectives. And in most cases, your research questions are a mirror image of the research objectives. Not always, but most of the time, they're a mirror image. And so I went on to say, this study will begin to address this gap that I have described by stating the objectives. First of all, to describe the profile of women ages 35 and older who are current modern contraceptive users, compare household decision-making power among modern contraceptive users and non-users, and then examine the association between women's decision-making power and current modern contraceptive use among Nigerian women ages 35 to 49 years. Many papers state the research questions as research objectives, but all you have to do is to turn these statements into questions to get the research questions that we were asking in this paper. So that's one example, and then I'll take you through another example, a very brief example, just looking at the background published in the abstract of a more recent paper. This paper is titled Low-Dose Aspirin for Preventing Intrauterine Growth Restriction and Preeclampsia in Sickle Cell Pregnancy in Nigeria, HIPSICLE, a randomized controlled trial by Professor Afolabi and colleagues from Lagos. So don't worry about the technical knowledge, the technical language here. I just want to point out three things in this particular, in the background of this particular abstract. First of all, the problem is in red. The problem that the group is trying to identify. Pregnant women with sickle cell disease are at increased risk of intrauterine growth restriction, preeclampsia, and sickle related condition. So that's the problem they're trying to identify. Or that's the problem they have identified, rather. And then they have identified the gap that they want to address. Low dose aspirin might reduce some of these complications, but has not been tested in sickle cell pregnancy. And then the third thing is the question that they're asking, even though it's stated as the statement here. We aim to investigate the effectiveness and safety of low-dose aspirin for preventing complications during pregnancy. So I didn't go into the main paper because of time, but I just wanted to show you that even in your abstract, it should be clear what the problem is, what the gap you're trying to identify is, as well as what your research questions or your specific objectives are. So you've identified the problem, you've identified the gap in knowledge, you've identified the piece of the gap that you want to address in your own research. You've identified what your research questions are, you've refined them, you've spoken with other people about them, you've refined them further. What next? You should justify your research, and I did give an example of justification in the first example. Why are you asking these questions? Why are you asking these questions now? Why do you care about these questions? And why should other people in the research community care about the questions that you're asking? All of these should be clear in your justification. Why do you want to spend limited resources to conduct this research? Why should a funder be willing to bankroll your research? Answers to these questions should fit into your documentation of your justification for your research. Apart from justifying your research, you need to conduct a very extensive critical review of the literature. Quick and dirty is not the best way to go because you might miss very important literature. Don't try to reinvent the wheel. If you have a good grasp of the existing body of literature, you will not reinvent the wheel. But if you do not have a good grasp, you might be doing something somebody else did 5 years ago. And yet it's not a field that you expect much difference in 5 years. In fact, using the same population that they use. So please spend the time to do a critical, extensive review of the literature and look for the research gaps. I had talked about the different ways you can identify research gaps, the types of research gaps, and where you can find some of these gaps to help you to refine your research questions. And after you have done that, you need to identify the most appropriate methods to answer your research questions. This is not a topic for conversation today, but this is just reminding you of the steps that will follow. And then think about potential limitations and how you intend to address them. And if it's human subjects research, you definitely need to obtain ethical approval for your research. Thank you very much for your kind attention, and I will hand over to the organizers to coordinate the questions and answers.
Thank you very much, Ma. This has been practical and exciting and also easy to follow. So we say thank you very much, Ma, for taking time out to do this. We indeed appreciate. You can see the reactions on the screen. I think almost everybody is happy and excited, and some of the comments also show. So let me quickly check if there is a question. I'm not sure there is at the moment. But then I want to hand over to Professor Akone Akemi for his reactions while good. I see hands for questions. All right, before I hand over to Prof, let me invite some people for their questions. We have Adedayo Oyebanji. So please unmute and ask your question. Thank you. Please keep it brief so that others too can ask their questions too. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Sir Prof. Thank you, Professor Olorun, for the beautiful presentation, ma. I have two questions. Can you hear me, sir and ma?
Yes, clearly.
Go ahead. 1 minute, please. Just use
Okay.
1 minute to answer your question, please.
Okay. Now, you referred many times to talking to people, experts in the area. My question in that respect is, in this climb, don't you think there are some that may now hijack one's research, having had idea of what one wants to do, which they didn't have earlier? That's just my question on that. Then the second one, I've seen some trainings on Elsevier on writing, and one admonished that will put ideas together to write a good paper rather than just one. Take, for example, you said if there are 3 or more ideas, that why we should
Go
write
straight to
just
your
one.
question because of time, please. Straight to your question. Yeah.
Yeah. So the question is it better to put 3 or 4 ideas together and write a very good research paper, or just dwell on only one and then write something that is just like commentary or whatever? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Adedayo Yebanji. We have Catherine Emakbo. Please ask your question very briefly. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, sir.
We can hear you clearly.
Hello, can you hear me now?
It's better.
Okay. Good morning, sir. Good morning, ma. Thank you so much for the beautiful presentation. I must say, I really admire you. And straight to my question, you mentioned that the problem doesn't have to be brand new, that the problem is huge, doesn't have to be brand new, but it must add to the body of literature. But is it possible that a problem takes from the body of literature? Like, for example, maybe there's been something published in the past, and then another research is done, and it completely debunks what had been done, which technically is like taken from the body of literature. Is that a possibility in research? Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much for the questions. So I'm going to hand over to Dr. Lalon to respond, and then we'll have Professor Konyaki and his comments. Okay, Catherine, you still want to say so? Okay, good. All right. Dr. Lalon, over to you.
Thank you very much for the thoughtful questions. First of all, the question from Dr. Yebanji about talking to experts is a very, very valid question, and I appreciate the question. And I know that people have unfortunately experienced what you described, where they go and talk to someone about their research and that person hijacks their research idea. What I would say to that is it's important for you to know who you're going to. Some people have a good track record. Go to someone who you know other people have talked to in the past, someone who you know has a positive track record, someone who you know will not hijack your work. Most people who do things like that have developed a name for themselves. And if you talk to the right people, they will tell you, I don't go to that professor, or don't go to that lecturer. So you need to do your underground work and ensure that you understand the personality and the nature of the people that you're going to talk to. You can also be very broad and not specific about your question if you are concerned about whether or not they will hijack your ideas. So it is a real problem. You just need to carefully select the person or the people that you will talk to. With respect to the second question, whether it's better to put 3 to 4 ideas together and write a good paper or dwell on one, it depends on how related the ideas are. You do not want to do salami slicing. For instance, if you do a big project that really has two main papers in it, you don't want to try to publish 6 papers from that because there will be overlap between the papers, what many people refer to as salami slicing. Or maybe I should say bread slicing for those who might not be so familiar with salami, which is a kind of meat that is cut very thin. So it depends on how related they are. You can have 3 or 4 research questions answered in a particular paper, but the research questions must be related to one another. Don't try to do things that are very different or distinct in the same paper. You can break that into 2 different papers. So it just depends on the relationship between the ideas that you're referring to, between the research questions. At the end of the day, you should make sure that you're telling one story and you're not going in many different directions. And sometimes it's hard for you as a researcher to see this because you're so close to your work. And that's why it's nice to work in research groups. When you're working in research groups, somebody else in the group can read what you've written and critique it. And when it's their turn, they will give you their work to read and critique. Again, you need to identify people you can trust to work with, because not everyone is trustworthy. And when you share your work with other people, there's always that risk that they could hijack your ideas. So you need to identify the right people. And usually working within trusted research groups is helpful. The third question was related to debunking what has been done. Absolutely. If you have new evidence that supersedes what has been published, you can definitely debunk what has already been published in the literature. But you should make sure that your evidence is bulletproof and that it's very clear. And of course, the good thing about peer review is the peer reviewers are likely to be experts in the field. And so they should be able to see how you built your case and be able to agree with the way you have built your case before they accept your paper. So you can definitely debunk what has been published, but you must have strong, solid evidence produced using the scientific method and very clearly laid out with a methodology that is foolproof and a method section rather that is foolproof and that other people can replicate. So before you stick your neck out to say what is in the existing body of literature is not correct, please go over your procedure and make sure that other people agree with you, and then you can proceed. Because as we get better tools, as we get more knowledge, we're able to critique what has been done in the past. And I've seen researchers who have debunked their own work because they have learned more and they have been able to get more evidence to show that what they had done in the past was not exactly correct. I hope this answers your questions.
Thank you, Ma. I think it's, I will hand over to Professor Akoniakim, Professor.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dimeji. Again, to sincerely appreciate Professor Fumi Olaolorun. Thank you so much, man. It's always, for me, a pleasure listening to you on diverse issues. I mean, the perspective you bring to classes, for me, is always excellent. So thanks so much, man. And let me confess that we just reached out to Professor Olaolorun just around this time yesterday. So thank you sincerely for accepting to do this and for doing it so excellently well. I'm of the habit of taking 2 cubes of sugar for this early morning lecture. And for me, again, there are 2 things I've picked from here. First is to say that there are different dimensions, what interests people in identifying the research gap. There are many things that, influence, what you think to see what this is where I want to, or what led to you identify a research gap. And I want particularly our PhD students to take that very, very seriously. To say that even when 1 or 2 of you are working on the same issues, the research gap you are looking at may be different completely. So please take that. And for me, that's the first cube of sugar I took. The second one also is about the rat race, in academics, the one we call the publish or perish. And I love the way she put it that it should be publish and publish. And in OAU now, we are saying you can innovate, you can publish, and you can flourish. And I've used several examples to say that. The publish or perish is a way that leads people to all kind of rat race, all those kind of unethical behavior, driving for numbers, just for you to meet up so that you get the title of a professor. But we've listened to her today that research is far beyond joining the race of titled people. You want to become doctor, you want to become professor. No, it can be so self-fulfilling, when you do research. And that's why I say for me, it's about you innovate first, publish, then you flourish. There are people who have published and published and published, and yet they perish, because nobody even cite them. Nobody even know them. Their work is insignificant. So we don't need to join that rat race as we are starting early, particularly for those of us who are early career researchers. So those are the two cubes of sugar that I picked for today's coffee. To sincerely appreciate again, Professor Olalorun. And you agree with me that towards the end of our lecture, she was trying to rush. Towards the end of our lecture, she was just trying to bring summary to many of those things. So for me, as a researcher, that suggests that maybe this time was not enough for her to really do justice to this. And I don't know if you people agree with me. You can mute to say, please, ma, can you come back again, ma? If you agree to have her back so that we can have the commitment from her today. Do people agree with me?
Yes, ma. So yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Like you can
Yes,
come back again.
Prof,
Yes,
come back.
agreed, sir.
Agreed.
Please, can you come back, ma?
Yeah,
We'd love to have
agreed.
you one more time.
Yes, please come
Thank
back,
you
ma,
very much.
especially to
Thank you
deal
very
with
much.
methodology. Thank you.
Despite everything, I would love to have you back, ma.
Thank you all very much. I appreciate it. We'll find a time.
Oh, thank you so much, ma. Okay, ma. Thank you for. So we will discuss with her to see, if possible, ma, if you can just help us handle all of these issues around the introduction, because I enjoyed the perspective that you bring to it, so that you help us look into those critical elements in the introduction and how eventually people sit down to write a beautiful introduction. And to thank you particularly for using your own example. That paper was published, I think, about, was it 12 or 14 years ago now? And we can see the relevance. I checked the citation of that paper. I think it has been cited about 120 times or more. I put it here. So that's the beauty of having a research question that speaks, to issues and the quality, of a particular publication. So we have 2 more minutes. I don't know if there are a last question from anybody. Otherwise, we don't like to exceed the 9 o'clock time.
Yes, Prof. Thank you very much, sir.
Okay, please,
This is
please. 1
Caleb
minute question.
from
Oh, my brother.
It's not really
Yes.
a question. It's
Okay,
a
please go ahead.
suggestion, sir.
Okay.
I really want to suggest that all postgraduate students in Obafemi Awolowo University should hook even to this platform to learn to do very good research in the system. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, sir. We try to encourage them, but we see how much we can push more for this. Thank you, sir, for joining us. Professor Adelawa is one of the leading figures in driving innovation in Nigeria. Thank you so much again for spending time with us. Okay. On that note, I want to yield the floor again to Professor Fumiola Olorun to give us a closing statement for this lecture. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Akinyemi, and thank you to all the organizers. It's been a pleasure spending this hour with you. I think it's an excellent program that you have going on for the postgraduate students. And I would like to recommend that each and every one of you pays attention to the research that you do. I tell my students that you should do research that you will be proud of 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now. So if you ask yourself about the research that you're doing now, think about whether you'll be proud of this research 30 years from now. If the answer is yes, congratulations to you. If the answer is no, or you don't have an answer, please go back to the drawing board and make sure that you always do the best research that you can. And like Professor Akinyemi said, publish and flourish. And please do innovate. Thank you very much for the invitation. It's been a pleasure being with you today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Waf. We appreciate you, and thanks all. And please, happy holiday, and please, happy Eid al-Fitr to our Muslim brothers and sisters. So please enjoy yourself. Auntie Fumi, God bless you. Thanks so much. We are grateful, man.
Thank you so much, Prof. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes.
Thanks, everyone.
Yes. Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you for
Bye-bye,
being here.
everyone. Thanks. Yes. Okay. Yeah.